And in this case, you see there's no threshold bar. When you see no threshold bar, this pattern 2 and this second column of presets and this second row of colors down here, they're unused. There's no trigger to set them off. You actually have to use this drop down over here to select something to trigger the mode. And so there's velocity, which is how fast you're moving. Tilt, which is if you're facing if the light is facing the ceiling or the light is facing the floor. Roll is if you're, I guess you could say the button is facing to the right or to the left, and flip is if the button is facing the ceiling or the floor. So we'll do velocity. And so here we have a set of thresholds. And so these thresholds, just define, this first one is actually where what I call the drop-off happens. So when you trigger the mode, you're triggering using this high threshold bar. And so this high threshold bar, if we set it at something reasonably low, sorry again, I have lag because I'm recording as I do this. So if I set the bar reasonably low, like something like an 8, then anything over sort of a digiting or tutting will most likely set off the mode. But with the trigger down here, down at 1, you'll have to almost stop before it falls off, where I say it falls back off into that A. So to trigger the B, you wouldn't have to go very fast, but to trigger the A, you'd actually have to drop off quite a bit. Now, if you drag them together, then that threshold is very sensitive. So if you're too close to the line, you'll see sort of artifacts where it jumps back and forth very, very quickly. It's probably better to use at least a little bit of a buffer rather than no buffer at all, but you can kind of do as you like. And then down here, you have your 2 different patterns. You can choose your patterns independently in Primer, so you could have a strobe and a Vectr, and you have both different sets of arguments to work with, and you also have 2 separate palettes down here to work with. So I'm not going to really demonstrate the specifics of how to edit that. I showed that off in the longer vector mode demonstration, along with saving the file, saving to the light, and uploading the other light. So if you haven't seen that, go watch that now. But these are, again, the basics of the primer modes. And the other facet of the primer modes is that if you are to do something like the tilt mode, the triggers, they change the numbers from the 0 to 32 speed threshold, which is very arbitrary, to something more specific, which is degrees. So in this case, the tilt has to be within 50 degrees of 50 degrees of your hand being flat with tilt. I guess you could say the same thing, like palm down, fingers pointed straight ahead. That would be 0 for both. So then 50 degrees, rolling your hand from left to the right is how roll works. Tilting your wrist up and down is how tilt works. And then completely flipping your hand over or not is how flip works. So those, again, are the basics of how all this goes. Again, one caveat for the tilt, roll, and flip modes is that because it's impossible to completely cancel out gravity, there's some inaccuracy in those measurements when you're moving very quickly. So don't trust those thresholds exactly, not at least whenever you're moving. If whenever you're steady and you're not moving and your hand's still, they'll be very, very accurate. But whenever you move under speed, it's not going to respond exactly how you want. So be aware of those thresholds, exactly how they how they trigger, how they don't trigger, and you'll enjoy your lights a lot more. So that's all for me.